Greater Bay Airlines cancels over 120 flights, affecting 5,500 passengers. Donald Trump defends his decision to grant clemency to people convicted of assaulting police in the 2021 Capitol attack. Hello and welcome to TVB News. I'm Melissa Hekalea. Greater Bay Airlines has canceled 128 flights between February and March due to delays in the delivery of new aircraft. Some 5,500 passengers have been affected. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Despite the recent cancellation of more than 100 flights, scores of Greater Bay Airlines or GBA passengers could still be seen preparing for their flights this morning. This man said he's worried about his return flight, noting that the airline could have notified passengers earlier about the cancellations. While this man said the arrangement is unacceptable, adding that he was fortunate for not being affected by the act's flights. This as a female passenger who purchased GBA tickets to Thailand for February said she was only notified about the flight being delayed last Saturday and is still waiting for a refund. The woman said she already made various bookings for the first day of her trip and that the airline's customer service hotline failed to pick up her calls. The airline issued a statement late last night saying that the affected flights mainly consist of those traveling to Japan, Thailand, and South Korea. It added the flight cancellations or delays were primarily caused by delays in the delivery of new aircraft and the fact that some of the planes in the fleet have to undergo regular checks. Also, because of the unfavorable performance of the airline's Hong Kong-Seoul route, GBA has applied for a suspension of flights on that route. Law Cheng-Kwok, a senior advisor to CUHK's Aviation Policy Research Center, believes the cancellations were caused by a chronic lack of passengers. This as he pointed out that the airline had already suspended its Singapore route last April. Greater Bay Airlines reminded passengers that they could get in touch with the airline via email or phone. Meanwhile, Secretary for Transport and Logistics Mabel Chan requested the airline's management to submit a report within a week and reimburse passengers for designated transport fees. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The Office of the Ombudsman today said the government should step up measures to tackle abuse of public housing resources. Mimo Singhai reports.
Abuse of public housing is an issue which the government aims to resolve. To do so, authorities have implemented measures such as the Well of Tenants policies and the Report Public Housing Abuse Award. Speaking to the media about its investigation into the government's work in tackling the issue, the Office of the Ombudsman said authorities should act more proactively to combat the problem. According to the office, the Housing Department's prosecution rate in relation to public housing abuse was 4.2% in 2024, the highest in the past 7 years. The office said some tenancy abuse cases show negligence on the part of estate management office staff. In April 2020, a tenant did not provide information about his wife when he submitted the income and assets declaration. The man later said his wife had left the unit since 2019. An investigation by the housing authority showed the wife owned properties in Hong Kong, but the woman had never declared her income from the properties. A notice to quit was sent to the tenant in February 2021. The man did not return the unit until November that year. The Office of the Ombudsman made 31 major recommendations to the Housing Authority and the Housing Society. They were asked to remind estate management's office staff to scrutinize the declaration forms submitted by tenants, to establish channels with mainland and Macau authorities for information about tenants' property ownership, as well as a heavier punishment for tenants in non-law breaching abuse cases. Meanwhile, the Ombudsman said authorities could incentivize relevant staff members to identify tenancy abusers.
We reckon the staff in the estate, they have the first-hand information. They should be the best persons to identify units that have been laid vacant for a long time, or non-tenants coming in or out. But the content or the details of such scheme, I leave it to the Housing Authority and Housing Society to consider.
The Ombudsman Office also said their recommendations, if accepted by the government, can help reduce the waiting time for public housing units. Memo 9, TVB News.
U.S. President Donald Trump, on his first full day in office, defended his decision to grant clemency to people convicted of assaulting police officers during the 2021 attack on the Capitol. He suggested there could be a place in U.S. politics for the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, seen as extremist groups whose leaders were convicted of seditious conspiracy against the U.S.
More than 400 of the people that you pardoned, though, assaulted officers. So I want to ask you about the Vice President, J.D. Vance. He said, this is a week ago, he said, if you committed violence on January 6th, obviously you should not be pardoned. Why is your Vice President wrong?
Well, only for one reason. They've served years in jail. They should not have served, and they've served years in jail, and murderers don't even go to jail in this country. And we had 1,500. We have 16 under review. As you know, we commuted about 16 of them because it looks like they could have done things that were not acceptable for a full pardon. But these people have served years of jail, and their lives have been ruined.
New U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with his counterparts from Australia, India, and Japan as the Trump administration kicked off its formal foreign policy engagements. The Quad meeting may pave the way for a summit of the four countries' leaders this year. The grouping is seen by many as an initiative to counter or at least slow down China's increasing influence in the region. Nazvi Karim has more.
I, Marco Rubio. I, Marco Rubio.
Soon after taking the oath as the new U.S. Secretary of State, it was straight to work for Marco Rubio. On day one in the job in Washington, D.C., he met his counterparts from the so-called Quad group that also features Australia, India, and Japan. The purpose of the group and the meeting reflect a key platform of the Trump administration's America First policy, which includes staying ahead of China militarily and economically. Rubio reaffirmed this stance when addressing employees of the State Department.
In our republic, the voters decide the course of our nation, both domestically and abroad. And they have elected Donald J. Trump as our president when it comes to foreign policy on a very clear mission. And that mission is to ensure that our foreign policy is centered on one thing, and that is the advancement of our national interest, which they have clearly defined through his campaign as anything that makes us stronger or safer or more prosperous.
In the Quad meeting, Rubio met Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong, who described bilateral ties with the U.S. as our most important strategic relationship. Rubio also had a meeting with India's Subramaniam Jaishankar, with India recently moving past a border dispute with China, as well as Takeshi Iwaya of Japan, which is undertaking its biggest military buildup since the Second World War. During his confirmation hearing, Rubio called China the most potent, dangerous, and near-peer adversary this nation has ever confronted. The West says China has been pursuing its regional territorial claims more aggressively, leading to confrontations with the Philippines and others. They say Beijing is also working towards establishing a true blue water navy capable of operating in seas far from China. The Quad meeting comes as Australia, India, and Japan work to improve relations with China. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Still ahead, Israel launches a major military operation in the West Bank city of Jenin. A knife attack in Yuen Long leaves one man dead and another injured. And a large-scale test event involving 63,000 spectators at the Kai Tak Sports Park this Friday. Welcome back. The truce in Gaza is holding as Israel launched a major military operation on Tuesday in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. At least 9 Palestinians were killed and 40 more wounded. Meanwhile, Israel's top general has resigned over the military's failures to prevent the October 7th, 2023 attacks by Hamas and other Palestinian groups. Nazvi Karim has more.
The ambulance sirens may be silent in Gaza, but they are blaring in the occupied West Bank. Israel's military, the IDF, launched a raid in the city of Jenin in what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says is an operation against Iranian-backed militants. The West Bank has seen increased violence since the start of the Gaza war, resulting in hundreds of deaths. The raid comes days after the start of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Also in the West Bank, Palestinian villages in Jinsafud and Al-Fundoq, north of Jerusalem, say dozens of Israeli settlers attacked homes and businesses. They burned down houses, a nursery and carpentry shop, and at least a dozen Palestinians were beaten. The attack comes hot on the heels of newly sworn-in US President Donald Trump lifting sanctions on ultra-nationalist Israeli settlers who previously attacked Palestinian villages. In central Tel Aviv, 4 people were wounded in a stabbing attack. Israeli police said the attacker who was killed was a foreign national. In Gaza, residents returning to their neighborhoods were greeted by rubble and destruction wherever they turned. In Jabalia, refugee camp resident Nizar Hussein is trying to build a makeshift shelter where his house used to be. We need years to get a house, he said. It is difficult to talk about and difficult to describe. Thank God for everything. The United Nations estimates that 50 million tons of rubble resulted from 15 months of relentless Israeli bombing. A cleanup could take up to 21 years. And beneath the tons of rubble are believed to be the bodies of thousands of Palestinians still unaccounted for. These civil defense rescues in Rafah, southern Gaza, have recovered more than 100 decomposed bodies since the ceasefire began. Meanwhile, Israel's top general resigned on Tuesday, taking responsibility for the security failures tied to Hamas's surprise attack that triggered the war in Gaza. Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi said in a video statement that he bears responsibility for the October 7, 2023 attack. During the attack, Hamas and other groups raided Israel, resulting in the deaths of 1,200 people and the taking of around 250 hostages. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
1 man died and another man was injured in a knife attack in Yuen Long. Authorities cordoned off Wang Yip Street West next to Hiep Factory building after the incident. 2 women who accompanied the victims were taken to the police station to help with the investigation. At around 5:30 in the morning, police received reports of 2 men being attacked by 7 to 8 people. A 24-year-old man sustained multiple knife wounds and was later confirmed dead at hospital. Another man suffered from knife wounds to the back. The 28-year-old was conscious when sent to Tuen Mun Hospital. A 36-year-old man appeared in court today, charged with 1 count of knowingly publishing material that had seditious intent. The case was mentioned at West Kowloon Law Courts this afternoon. The man, who claims to be a bus technician, was accused of posting statements and pictures on Facebook between March last year and January this year with content provoking hatred towards the government, the police, and judiciary. The case has been adjourned until March. The defendant did not apply for bail. Sources said National Security Police this morning took in for questioning 3 siblings of Chung Kim-hwa, the absconded former deputy CEO of the Hong Kong Public Opinion Research Institute. One of Chung's sisters was seen leaving the Central District Police headquarters at around noon. Chung's wife and son last Tuesday assisted authorities with the investigation. The police searched the headquarters of the polling station he worked for last week and took in its president, Robert Chung, for investigation. The National Security Wing of the police said Chung Kim-hwa was suspected to have engaged in seditious activities and advocated for Hong Kong independence via social media. Authorities have placed a $1 million bounty on him. A large-scale test event will be held at the Kai Tak Sports Park starting at 6 p.m. on Friday. The event will involve some 63,000 spectators at the Sports Park Stadium, Arena, and Youth Sports Ground. During the pressure tests, 50,000 spectators will be watching various performances by the disciplined services at the stadium, while another 13,000 will be seated at the Arena and Youth Sports Ground. The test event will include security checks at entrances, emergency evacuations, and the normal departure of spectators. 80% of the participants consist of civil servants. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Bye for now.